In this video, I'll be sharing the secrets to building your neck, traps, upper back, and shoulders in an athletic way, becoming more explosive, getting carryover to a lot of sports, and maximizing hypertrophy. So let's get right into it. The first thing I'll say is weighted stretching is the key to maximizing upper trap gains. This is a message I've been repeating for many years. And one example that I can remind you of is of the farmer walk exercise. This is a movement in which there is no shrugging component or concentric for that matter. We're simply walking forward, arms are stretched by your side, and the weight is stretching out those straps into explosive gains and development. Fact, and no one can argue that this movement will not give you bigger traps. And when we extend that logic to other exercises like rack pulls, deadlifts, etc., it makes sense why you don't have to necessarily shrug to get yoked. Though I'm not going to recommend that in today's video. Rather, I want to extend this discussion to the topic of deadlifts themselves. I think this is the most feasible way of stretching out your traps to the limit because there's a lot of loading potential. This explains why most elite powerlifters are not lagging in the trap department, even if the rest of the system is subpar for the trap specifically. It's the weighted stretch that got them these gains. That said though, what's optimal in the context of hypertrophy training? Weighted stretch and higher repetitions. What's the best way to achieve this with pulls? Is it doing 1 max conventional deadlifts off the ground? 1 max sumos? 3 sets of 3? No. It's classic bodybuilding approaches. Your 3 sets of 8 to 12. Heck, even the old school methods of 5x5. It's driving up that volume that really makes a difference. But the thing is, if you rely strictly on the conventional deadlift, now we run into a different problem. Compromising lower back recovery. The truth is, it's harder to incorporate higher reps with this exercise. That's why variations make more sense. And what I found maximizes the yoke gains while minimizing recovery issues is 2 things. One is adjusting the angle from which you pull such that it is a block rack pull, but it's not excessive. What I'm saying is, set the height to 1 to 4 inches. If you want more info on that, check out my video, Athletic Rack Pulls. To get carryover, your pull should not exceed 100 pounds from the ground. It's all you have to do. Yet the slight adjustment allows for more training volume without hurting the lower back as much. That's the distinction. On top of that, it removes some of that focus from the posterior chain and transferred a bit more into the upper back and traps, which is exactly what we want. The torso angle is not that different. And as I established previously, the farmer walk, in which we are completely upright, still builds those traps like crazy. So it doesn't matter whether your body is at this angle or this angle. Instead, view it as we're overloading the yoke with a bit more weight, still getting carryover, but now we can drive up that volume because the lower back is no longer a limiting factor. You can't do as much on the floor because of that reason alone. So I don't want to hear any complaints about the range of motion. The deadlift height is already arbitrary by design given the size of the Olympic plates. So the fact that we have less hip flexion is a good trait. Actually, if you read Greg Knuckles' article on the trap bar pull, he suggests that this may be a better position for most lifters, or simply pulling off blocks. And he's talking about the elevation, by the way, because of what I just described. And for your high reps specifically, this is where the RDLs come into play. I'd recommend good mornings in the context of general carryover for raising your 1 max on the deadlift or just athletics in general, but we're not getting the same weight stretching benefits as the RDL. So even though the stimulus fatigue ratio is superior in this case, truth is RDLs are still fine. And because of the stretching component itself, does in fact make it better for yoke training. So that's where you're gonna get your higher reps in. So you can still max out on your deadlifts, rotate the variations on a weekly basis. I'm all for that. That's super athletic. But make sure that you're getting in some back off work as well, specifically off an elevated surface, very minor, and driving the volume through that and the accessories. That's what we're talking about here. Let's say 60% accessory volume, 40% through the main volume, if you want to really be balanced like that. Additionally, I would strongly recommend that you do speed pulls. So it's not just about overloading and getting the higher reps, which is very typical of bodybuilding type workouts. No, we want to really train like athletes. And the best way to do this is with rate of force development training. There's no better way than high set, slow reps with low rest intervals and incorporating the accommodating resistance. There's many videos on YouTube demonstrating how to do this. Again, check out my video on athletic pulls. I talk more about this, but essentially play around with things like 10 sets of 2, 15 sets of 1, 20 sets of 1. and add in the bands and chains because it balances out the strength curve, which is key for explosive gains, and it overloads the upper back and traps similar to the block pull. So now we're getting the best of all worlds. We're pulling from the ground, but it's not just a Warner Max, which isn't really the best stimulus unless you're getting in a lot of training frequency, as seen as in a Bulgarian type program. So we're pulling from the ground, but the sets are high and the reps are high. So we're inverting the setup here, which is still excellent for building size. And with all the accessories thrown in, there's nothing lagging volume-wise. But you're gaining in every other way through the explosiveness and the strength gains that will be acquired. Because all this stuff gives you carryover and makes you a better athlete overall and a better lifter. Now, the second element to this formula, which is replacing the cheat row emphasis, is weighted pull-up specialization combined with high volume rows. Back in the day, I was all about just doing excessive cheat rows, which did work, but I realized that there was another way, and this is that other way. It's what I've been doing to keep my back constantly growing and looking thick and wide. Why is it so effective? Well, pull-ups are more suited for heavy training. If you start doing singles, doubles, and triples on a row, it's very hard to quantify and form breakdown is likely to occur. Just the nature of the strength curve proves this. Pull-ups, you don't have that problem, and the best part is it does not impede your recovery like a row would. And the row is going to hurt you for squat and deadlift type workouts. Pull-ups do this less because there's no low back stress. We're moving through space, maximizing that weighted stretch on the lats, which, as I discussed in the first part of this video, is crucial for hypertrophy yoke training. So the recovery, form, and percentage aspect is far more viable than just doing a bunch of rows. But we can't ignore the rows because they are important for further taking those rhomboids to the next level. Just some other areas in the upper back that the pull-up might not be hitting as hard. But we don't have to start off with it. It doesn't have to be 2 rows, 1 pull-up. We can invert the typical setup. Make weighted pull-ups your competition lift, in which you can actually do singles. Follow it up with rows. It can be inverted rows. It can be pen lay rows if you really want to get a bit more explosive, though try to minimize the cheating on that. And with this, everything has been assured. No wondering, what if I get muscular imbalances? What if I'm potentially hurting myself from not including rows? Well, now that's no longer a problem. And since we're doing the rows after the pull-ups, you're going to get more out of less weight. So you don't have to go as heavy. You can do your classic sets and reps, 3 to 5 sets of 10 to 20, or doing your 5x5. In fact, I'm going to talk about the shrugging component later, but we want to keep the sets and reps relatively similar. So this is how I personally train, and it's what I recommend. Bodyweight training in general is highly effective for athletes, but a lot of guys limit themselves with high rep endurance type workouts instead of adding on weight. This is how you really take a simple exercise and turn it into something even greater. A compound movement that has insane loading potential, great stimulus fatigue ratios, and athletic potential in general. This is going to increase your deadlift. It's going to make you better on the field and just make you more agile, more in control of your body as a whole. And your endurance workouts are going to go up too because the absolute strength element has been addressed. So now anything that is of a lower percentage, you can high rep it easy. So there's always that to consider. And for the rows, one thing that you guys might be asking me now is, what about cheat reps? Can I still do that? And my answer would be 100% yes, but please see my video, are you rowing too heavy? So if you're going to do volume rows, sure, it doesn't have to be perfectly stationary, 100% perfection, though you might gravitate towards that because of being in a pre-exhausted state. So if you're going to cheat, make sure it's controlled cheating. That's all I'm going to say about that. But yes, it does maximize the weighted stretch. So even though this absolutely works, I want you to look at this from the overall programming perspective. You probably don't have to go crazy with the cheating. Anyway, let's go back a bit now and talk about the traps. The third element to this formula is direct isolation work. We're not minimalists over here. We can't ignore the concentric followed by the squeeze. That would be subpar, and you know it. Remember, it's everything combined that really takes your yoke to that next level, not potentially losing out on some gains. Even though it is true, I'm going to say this right now. You can get big traps through nothing more than weighted stretch. It's still optimal to isolate the traps directly with a shrug. Come on. That said, what's different about this formula? Not much. I still recommend power shrugs because you are going to get very explosive from doing them. You're still hitting concentric failure while being able to maximize the weighted stretch overload at the bottom, the negative is really stretching you out to the max. This is why exercises like the snatch grip high pull, which can also replace shrugs for this formula, by the way, are so effective at getting you yoked. You're getting that deep pulling sensation. So what's the problem here? The only downsides I can think of is if you start using atrocious form, that head bobbing garbage, or not bringing your shoulders high enough. So you're just doing this right here instead of getting that squeeze. But is that a problem with the exercise or the user and misapplied program? So what I've come up with this time around is a strategy that prevents you from doing the chicken bobbing, but we're still overloading and getting the power shrug in, which again, I can't stop promoting because it really is effective. Stay with higher repetitions. Even though form breakdown is more likely to occur as you get closer to failure, the reps leading up to that point are generally going to be better. I found that when you get past a certain number on your shrugs, let's say beyond 405 to 495, that's when things get a bit ugly. So with this method, you can get more out of less weight, but you're still overloading to a certain extent, much more than with a strict shrug. But because we're dealing with bodybuilding parameters, it's going to look a lot cleaner. The distinction is that you're doing power reps, not cheat reps. And to top this off even further, we want to include a strict as well. This solves every possible problem, and there's two ways to do this. You can either do strict repetitions first, and then the moment you fail, you keep getting a bit more reps in until you have nothing left in you whatsoever, or you can start off with the heavier loads and then just gradually reduce as you get further into the workout, or incorporate drop sets. So let's say you do 495 for reps of 10. Okay, drop it down to 4 plates now. Try to get another 5, 10 reps or even more. And you can go all the way down to 1 plate if you want to. So you're hitting true failure, you're overloading, you're getting the way to stretch. What more do you want? So that's what I would say to that. You definitely want to include a power shrug of some type, or a snatch grip high pull, like I said, if you want to ensure that nothing is lagging in the traps. So all these compound movements I've mentioned throughout this video is how you'll look massive without even trying. Outer extremities of the body really giving that 3D mountainous pop. But there's another aspect to this too, which is highly ignored by many people who falsely believe that yoke training is all about the traps or the neck. Emphasizing the shoulders. And what's the best way to do this? In fact, what is the fourth element to this formula? Overhead press emphasis. Here's the truth. Having that boulder shoulder effect is essential for maximizing your yoke. And the best way to do this, the most time-proven athletic way, an exercise in which we're standing up, full body engagement, maximum stabilization of the upper back and traps. Overhead press. You can't beat it, period. And I recommend mixing in all the variations. Standard, Swiss bar, even doing with dumbbells. Do not neglect your vertical presses. At the same time, it tends to be a bit more suited for most sports. I would say the vertical and the incline angle is a lot more useful in most cases. Of course, it does help if you got that flat pressing strength, but it's not what we see in a lot of sports. So I'm just speaking in a general context here. And what I could say about OHP is that you are going to get tremendous carryover to your incline pressing. So that does a little bit better job than just emphasizing flat and trying to build the incline, the OHP through that. I would say the ratio is actually better the other way around. And OHP will still give you sick carryover to your flat bench, so there's nothing really lagging there, and you can always do flat bench as an accessory. So I'm not telling you to drop bench, just shift the mindset into overhead press. Make that your competition lift. If you do a full body segment, for example, hit 2 OHPs, 1 bench, not 2 bench, 1 OHP. That's all I'm trying to say. Favor that a little bit more for your pressing, and your shoulders will not only thank you in terms of feeling more rejuvenated and getting much bigger, because vertical is obviously better than flat in terms of maximizing that specifically, but also the upper back engagement. If you're over OHP, 200 pounds for reps, you know what I'm talking about. The sensation that you get, the cramping is unreal. You'll actually get DOMs if you undertrain your back for a little bit of time. That's a sign that you're engaging those muscles. And the bench press, yeah, you are staying tight. You got the scapular retracted, you're locked in, but your upper back is not necessarily going to grow from just doing flat bench. Whereas with the OHP, it will. Anyway, I now bring you the 5th and final element of the athletic yoke formula. Direct neck training with a twist. What I mean is emphasizing the side work and rotation, which is not mandatory for general hypertrophy training, but if you're an athlete of any type, you're a fighter, you're a field athlete, your head's gonna be moving around in different directions. So you gotta be training that specifically. But the thing is, the muscle function itself is similar to neck flexion. In a way, you can say they're neck curl replacements. But obviously, you still wanna do neck flexion, and of course, do not neglect that neck extension. So I'm not telling you to just do the side work. Hit the rear as well, and your standard front exercises. In regards to the sets and reps, I recommend a higher approach, which is pretty much what I've been saying all this time, 4 sets of 25, but you could even go beyond that point, like doing reps of 50 or even 100, or just round type training. 1 to 3 minute rounds of straight neck work. This is a bit more specific for athletes. It will develop that neck fatigue resistance more than just 3 sets of 10 or just lifting heavy stuff, which is probably not what you're gonna do in most situations anyway. So we're going for that maximum burn, and this lends itself really good for circuit training type workouts, in addition to supersetting, which is the next thing that I wanna add on to the neck training element. This is where the lightweight shrugs come into play. In the past, I see guys who were obviously on steroids recommending super lightweight shrugs with a squeeze, saying that this is how you're gonna get your gains to the next level. Obviously, I wasn't a fan of that, and I'm still not a fan today, if that's your main method of getting bigger traps. But if we use that strategically in the context of a program that was already well thought out, then it's very good. And I recommend that you do this with your neck training because the neck and traps are directly connected. And the superset will give you a similar burn in that upper region, but it's not interfering with the recovery that much. Just a little bit, but in a way that allows us to get more out of less weight. So we're already gonna be doing higher reps regardless, but this takes it to an even further level, but not in a harmful manner. You'll understand this if you incorporate circuit training type neck workouts. Actually, I released one a few months back, which demonstrates this perfectly. So for this formula, just standard neck training ain't gonna cut it. You wanna hit the sides and rotation as a mandatory feature and possibly include some shrugs to go with it. This way, literally everything of yoke training has been addressed. The blend allows you to go back and forth nonstop, and overall, we're getting more out of less weight. By the way, there's technically a 6th element to this formula, which I'm gonna refer to as a bonus point because it's not what's gonna make the biggest difference. It just supplements what you're already doing. That is GPP yoke workouts. I mean, you're already doing conditioning work, let's say 12 to 24 hours after your main workouts. Maybe you're doing it 2 to 4 times a week. Why not pick exercise that hammer the upper back even more? Like, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the farmer walk. Carrying things is athletic. This is why strongman competitors focus so heavily on some of these exercises. Doing the bear hug walks, it could be with a sandbag, hugging onto a bunch of plates. Any exercise that forces you to really engage that upper back, usually in isometric fashion, is going to be favorable. And of course, that can also include grease in the groove pull-ups, which will further add on, or even grease in the groove inverted rows, which can give you a bit better upper back emphasis. Really pay attention to exercise selection. We want to build that fatigue resistance in the yoke muscles. So that, my friends, is the athletic yoke formula. Took a long time for me to come up with this. I thought about it for so long, but I pieced it together. I looked at what worked for me in the past, what I've observed in thousands of my lifters who watch my channel, comment, give me their feedback, and this is what I've concluded. This is the second way of really taking your neck, traps, up back, and shoulders to the next level. I would say it's just as good as the first one, and some would argue that's even better in some cases. It's certainly more meticulous and accounts for many of the downfalls of the first approach. With some guys, they loved for the hypertrophy gains, but in other ways, they weren't totally satisfied. So this solves everything. So I hope you enjoy it. Try it out. Let me know how your gains explode in the next 3 to 6 months. I can't wait to hear your feedback, and I'll see you in the next video.